Canada went to the polls and they have made their vote. And unfortunately, not that it affects me, once again, they have voted for the Liberal government, which completely astounds me because of the past 10 years of what the Liberal government has done in Canada. And one of the things that we help with people from North America and all over the world is relocate to Serbia. And one of the biggest trends we've seen in this past year are a lot of Canadians, either people who have never been to Serbia and want to move to Serbia, they visited a couple times, they fell in love, or people who have left former Yugoslavia, moved to Canada, and have absolutely had enough of the Liberal government and are looking to come back. They're looking to reestablish their citizenship, looking to get their children citizenship through descent, looking to purchase property. And these are things that we're able to do here at Relocation Serbia. And today we're going to talk about the past 10 years of the Liberal government in Canada and at the new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, and what his track record has been, because not too many people in Canada even know who Mark Carney is, yet they were able to vote him in. Now, being someone who still holds Canadian citizenship, I still have no intentions of moving back to Canada. However, 10 years ago, I was in Canada and I have felt some of the decline of what has happened in Canada, and which is one of the reasons that I decided to move myself and my family to Serbia because of a better life. Now, I'm not talking about the bad things in Serbia that are happening, or should I say the things that are not pleasant. I say in many of my videos, there's no country that is 100% perfect, but you're going to want to deal with or live in a country that you can live with the things that are happening in that country. And so I feel, and many of the people and the clients that we work with come to Serbia say, hey, listen, we would much rather live in Serbia and deal with the things that are happening here, because the things that are happening in Canada are far worse. Now, let's jump into some of the past 10 years of the Liberal government, which was held under Trudeau before he stepped down and Mark Carney came into place as the acting prime minister. And now he has actually become the prime minister of Canada, and I believe he's actually in with a majority government as well. Now, don't quote me on that. That's just from what I've read, and I have to still do some digging in on the majority government. But even if it wasn't a majority government, look at what Trudeau did in Canada under his leadership. He brought in the NDP to prop him up and in essence had a majority government, then they were able to do as they please. But let's get into what the actual Liberal government has done in Canada. Now, they have one of the most poorest economic growth in all of the world. They have a 0.5% economic growth in the past 10 years. All right. You look at Serbia, for instance, and they had last year a 4% GDP increase just in that 1 year, not to mention the other years. And this year, we're forecast to have even another strong GDP that outpaces a lot of the EU countries as well. Now, the federal government in Canada also has racked up a huge debt of $2.1 trillion, and none of that has been in the benefit of the Canadians. You had higher gas prices, higher food prices, higher housing costs. You had all these liberal programs that came into play that actually didn't do anything for the average Canadian living there. Now, the other thing is that the middle class Canadians paid more taxes than ever, higher than the basic living costs like food, shelter, and clothing. Now, there's a statistic out there that shows that the average Canadian needs to work till June of every year to just pay the taxes that they owe to the government. And that equates to 51% of their income goes simply towards taxes. One of the beautiful things that we have in Serbia is one, lower taxes than what we have in Canada. The income tax rate is 10%. The corporate tax rate is 15%, which is, in my eyes, very favorable for anyone wanting to establish life here. Whereas in Canada, the more you make, the different tax bracket that you're set in, and the more you pay, which really doesn't give you much incentive. Myself, as a former electrical contractor in Ontario, I was paying a corporate tax rate of 39% because I was making X amount of dollars. I had also then employees to pay for. I had material that skyrocketed, especially during the COVID era. Now, when you look at the broken promises in Canada, that has virtually no end. And I'm not saying that Serbian government keeps all their promises. I again am what I would say is fairly new to the political process here in the political parties and the political ideology. And so I really am sitting back still and trying to figure out how things are perceived here in Serbia. Everyone wants to complain about the government here, but you go to any country really and tell me who's not complaining about their government. Now, the promises that they were going to have electoral reform, that was never delivered. They also pledged that there would be 2 billion trees planted. They barely planted 2.3% of what they're saying. And one of the funny things that I always look at is that Canada was the only country that had a carbon tax, all right? The carbon on the cars you drive, the air you breathe, the heating of your homes, so on and so forth. But if you take into consideration the amount of trees that Canada already has and the carbon that Canada emits, we are already at a carbon neutral or carbon positive footprint, which means that the trees eat up more of the carbon than that is produced just simply on the number of trees that they have. And so I don't even know what the idea of planting more trees were, maybe due to the forest fires that they had there as well. Now, they had a promise of 4.5 billion to mental health transfers. And that was never fulfilled. What did the Liberal government bring into play? They brought into the picture of MAID. MAID is basically assisted suicide, medically assisted induced, and I forget what the D is, but it's basically assisted suicide, and the number is in the tens of thousands since this program came in. And it wasn't that you're a complete vegetable or that you've gone through a tragic accident that you're able to take on this program here. If you even felt depressed or felt that life was too hard, you as a Canadian can apply for MAID and basically be put out of your misery because the Liberal government has made it so. And which to me is very sad, because what we need to do is have a generation that is actually a strong generation, not that, everything has to be roses and daisies, that if someone calls you by the wrong pronoun, that if someone misgenders you, that now all of a sudden I want to go and off myself essentially, and that the government will help you with this. And I've even seen this in the medical field as well. People who have waited for months and years for medical procedures to the point that they've had limbs amputated, that their health has declined. Yes, they call it a free healthcare system there, but it's honestly not that great and actually has completely declined over the years. And so people have waited so long for certain procedures that I can honestly go and get done within 24 hours here in Serbia that people have actually taken on MAID, and they are no longer around, unfortunately. Now, the other one is that the Trudeau government said that they will fix all the long-term drinking water advisories for the First Nations, and that has never come to fruition and completely failed. Now, people here in Serbia that watch this channel, you would be wondering, listen, Canada is what is perceived as a first world country. And, when I tell people that there are people out there like First Nations people that don't have fresh drinking water, they are looking at me like I am absolutely psycho. And they're like, what do you mean they don't have fresh drinking water? Yes, their drinking water is not at all advisable to drink. And so if you can go on some other channels, some other news networks, you can see firsthand what I'm talking about. Now let's talk about the scandals that we have in Canada, because one of the things that Serbs love to talk about is the corruption here in Serbia. However, they fail to understand that there's corruption all over the world, and Canada has seen some of the biggest ones. Now, the first one was the SNC Lavalin affair that Trudeau primarily pursued. The Justice Department ruled unethical. The next one is the We Charity scandal, where the Trudeau government awarded a $912 million contract to a charity tied to his family's massive, trust fund, or whatever you want to call it. That was a huge fallout. Then the next one is the vacations that the Trudeau parties took. They accepted luxurious vacations in violations of the ethics laws. They also had the blackface scandal, which was not only one but multiple incidents that enraged the Canadian people because of how Trudeau perceived himself and portrayed himself. He would cover his face in actual black ink and go out in public and portray that he was a different ethnicity, which was, kind of disrespectful to those people that he was trying to portray. Now, the other one that you have is the public disconnect. The housing crisis exploded under his leadership. I can tell you right now, the city that I was born and raised in Canada, we never saw people that were in homeless encampments. And this is what I'm talking about, is not actually homeless shelters, because those are overpopulated, but tent cities, people literally living in tents, and not just one or two. You can drive down in some parts of Canada for kilometers at a time and just see simple people camping out in the middle of the streets, in the middle of parks. And, if you were a tourist, you thought, oh, this is a big, barbecue that's going on. And it's not. It's actually homeless people that cannot afford their housing, that cannot afford their lifestyle, their cars, their furniture. They cannot afford medical procedures, and they have essentially ended up on the streets. And there's this statistic out there that says that many of the Canadians and people even in the United States, if they miss one paycheck, that they are in financial ruins, because in Canada, most of the people live on a credit system. Everything's financed, right? Your house is financed for 25, 30 years. Your cars are financed, and not just one, you have multiple cars. Your furniture is financed. Your school debt is financed. And you're just financed and financed, and you'll never get out of so much. Plus, once the insurance kicks in, you're completely done on that note. The cost of living has skyrocketed. I just touched on this a second ago. The food has skyrocketed, but not only that, but your gas with the carbon tax, the tariffs that they've implemented on other countries. We're not talking about the United States and that side of things, but what has Canada done with imposing tariffs on other countries' products that have skyrocketed them coming into Canada. The next one is the alienation of Western provinces like Alberta and Saskatchewan with carbon taxes, right? We in Alberta and in Saskatchewan have some of the largest oil deposits there. And I was in the oil fields from 2013 to 2016. And, at 2013, when I got there, it was easy to find a job. I was offered 7, 8 jobs left, right, and center as an electrician. However, near the end of my term in the oil fields, you saw that people were not having jobs, layoffs were coming into play, and people were actually scared about about where their income's going to be coming in, because a lot of them lived, say, in Nova Scotia, PEI, where there's not a lot of work out there. And so what they ended up doing was jumping on a plane, flying to Alberta, living in the camps, doing 14/7s, 21s and 7s, so on and so forth. And that's how they generated their income. But under the Trudeau leadership, once he came into play, Trudeau is anti-oil, and those industries took a huge hit, which put on the pressure as well on the regular Joe that lives in Canada. Now, the next one is that despite the reconciliation talk, spent nearly $100 million fighting First Nations in court. So one of the things that I've never understood is that the First Nations were one of the first people that lived in Canada. Yet they were some of the most mistreated people in Canada. They do not have fresh drinking water, like I've said. They are consistently deprived of just basic living conditions. And when they sue the government uses those said tax dollars that they get from the people to fight their own people, essentially, and the people that have more right to their land, and they're encroaching on their land and arresting people because they're standing up for their land. This to me is absolutely unacceptable in any sense. Now, let's not even continue on that end, but let's talk about who is Mark Carney. Now, Mark Carney is someone who came in to replace Justin Trudeau when he stepped down. But nobody knows anything about Mark Carney. They essentially known him for the last 3, 4 weeks since he came into play, and somehow all of a sudden he won the federal election, which absolutely astounds me because of the complete chaos that the Liberal government has created. Yet the funny thing is, a lot of the things that Mark Carney has done in the eyes of the Canadian people in the last 3, 4 weeks since he's been in power are exactly those things that the Conservatives were saying that they would do, such as eliminate the carbon tax. However, they did not just eliminate the carbon tax, they just reduced it to zero, but it's still a law. And I believe this was a huge play for them to actually win the elections, and then they're going to be bringing it back in some way, shape, or form, right? And only time will tell. I'm not saying that this is going to happen, but this is my hunch. Now, he also was the advisor in the Bank of Canada between 2000 and 2013. He kept interest rates ultra low, fueled record high housing crisis and household debt. He also worked for the Bank of England between 2013 and 2022, or sorry, 2020. And if you look at what he did while he worked with the for the Bank of England, he has completely destroyed that as well. One of the things is that during the Brexit process that they had there were warnings seen as political interference. He was accused of being biased against the Leave voters, the ones that wanted to leave Brexit. There was also a Brexit forecast called Project Hysteria by media and politicians, which was backed by Carney, of course. Now, the next one is the one that fears me for Canada is that he is seen and has called himself a globalist. And seeing what the WEF is looking to do is globalize everything. I don't think this is a good lookout for Canada at all, is having someone who is a globalist. And when it comes to the WEF, he is a ex Goldman Sachs banker. He has deep ties to global institutions like the World Economic Forum. He's seen by many Canadians as an out of touch globalist, not a man of the people, which again surprised me of why he's actually been elected. Has there been some sort of scandal in this electoral process? I'm not saying that there is, but it makes me wonder when I speak to so many Canadians to this day, and so many are against keeping the Liberal government in play. How did they win the electoral votes? Whose palms were they greasing? I also saw another scenario where when people went to go vote at the voting polls, that they were given a pencil and not a pen. And people were saying, this is the reason that they were doing that is because then they can erase that vote and check a different box. Did that happen? Only time will tell, I guess, when it comes to me. Now, when it comes to political experience, he has never held an elected office before. Becoming Liberal Party leader and prime minister is something that, again, astounds me because he's never been in politics. I've never heard of Mark Carney until he was just replaced 3-4 weeks ago. And being that you don't know someone's history of how they acted is very scary, because we even have people that are in politics that behave a certain way until they get into office and then completely change tone. And being that we have what essentially is a stranger is kind of scary in my sense. I'd rather know my enemy than not know my enemy, because if I know my enemy, I know what kind of things that they're going to be pulling as well. Now, the next one is that a lot of people raised major doubts about his ability to navigate the messy world of politics. I believe that he's going to work in the best interest of the globalists and the elites, because this is what he has said that he is, right? Another thing is that a lot of people are saying that he has not paid taxes in Canada. A lot of his stuff is offshore, and he has refused to answer those questions as to where does he pay taxes. And in my idea, there's ways that you can set up your global and business structures, of course. But if you're going to be someone who represents the people in Canada, you should be open with the people in Canada. But, one of the things that we also do help with people here that are looking to move to Serbia is reduce their taxes. So I'm not saying that he's a criminal by any means, because these could be actual real legal ways that he's reducing his taxes, because the average person who is an employee doesn't understand that there's ways to legally reduce taxes. And that's something that we help people that are moving from the United States, that are dual tax citizens, no matter where they live, and helping them reduce their income in one way, shape, or form. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to the Liberal Party and what Mark Carney holds. I'm not saying that it's a doom and gloom situation moving forward into the future, but if looking at the past 10 years of the Liberal government and what they have actually done to Canada, the next 10 years does not look very bright for those. And for those that have contemplated moving to somewhere else, or have looked to move back to Serbia from a place that you once did come from, it might be that time to get that plan B. Not essentially move here right away, but look at possibly getting citizenship by descent, purchase some property here, get your children that citizenship as long as they're entitled to it, and have that plan B and see how the waters play out. I do wish the best for the people of Canada, but me and myself and my wife and everyone that I've talked to and our clients that have actually moved from Canada to Serbia have said they have never made a better choice in their life. If you like this video, please smash that like button. If you have not subscribed to this video, please do so, and I'll see you on the next one.